I'm Jessica, and I'm 27 years old. After graduating from vocational school, I began working in medical administration. It was a busy but rewarding job, and I felt a deep sense of fulfillment. However, I decided to quit when I got married. My husband, John, wanted me to focus on our home and asked me to take care of his mother. "Please look after my mother. I'm begging you," he said. "Don't worry, I'll do my best to care for her," I assured him. I never saw myself as someone who clung to a career, so I had no doubts about stepping into this role. I met John through a mutual friend, and after a year of dating, we got married. By that time, he had already lost his father to illness and was living with his mother. "This will be a big help," John said. "I worry about her being all alone." "It's understandable. We can't leave your mother by herself," I agreed. I learned that his mother had fallen ill shortly after his father's passing, leaving her mostly bedridden. John had been managing most of the housework on his own. When I joined their household, my mother-in-law welcomed me warmly. "Let John handle the outside work, and please take over the house for me," she requested. "Yes, mother-in-law, I look forward to working with you," I replied. Our relationship was smooth. She was bedridden, so I naturally took on a dominant role in managing the household. However, the real issue lay in my relationship with John. As soon as we settled into married life, he began to grow distant. "Hey, how about we go for a drive on our next day off?" I suggested one day. "Your mother seems to be doing well, and I think half a day away won't be a problem." "Sorry, I'm tired," was all he said. "I want to rest properly that day." "Oh, I see. I'm sorry," I replied, trying to hide my disappointment. It wasn't long before I noticed that John seemed increasingly bothered by our interactions. At first, I assumed it was because of his busy work schedule, so I didn't dwell on it too much. But as time went on, he started avoiding me more and more. Even our intimate moments became rare. I would plan everything for the perfect night, only to be turned down. "Please, can you be a bit more cooperative? I want to have a child as soon as possible," I pleaded. "I understand how you feel, I want that too. But, sorry, let's try next time," he would say. As I neared 30, I couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency. My mother-in-law had also been urging us to give her a grandchild, and it was painful not to be able to fulfill her wish. But before we could, she passed away. After her death, John's attitude toward me grew colder and more distant. "Welcome home, John. I made your favorite cream stew for dinner," I greeted him one evening. John, are you listening? "Oh, do you want to take your bath first?" "Got it. I'll be waiting." But John had become almost completely silent at home. No matter how much I tried to engage him in conversation, it was hopeless. He ignored me completely. I thought it was likely due to the shock of losing his mother. Naturally, I assumed he just needed time to recover from the emotional toll, so I decided to support him as best as I could as his wife. However, days passed, and John remained uninterested in me. "John, how have you been feeling lately? Are you sleeping well?" I asked gently, hoping for some connection. "I want to discuss something important," I said, trying to break through the silence that had grown between us. "I'm thinking about getting a fertility test. What do you think, John?" But there was no response. I tried to change the subject, hoping to engage him. I talked about his health, his feelings, our child, and our future, anything to spark his interest. But every attempt ended in silence. "John, please say something. Have I done something to upset you? If there's something you don't like or want me to change, please tell me," I pleaded, my voice filled with desperation. But no matter how earnestly I tried, John wouldn't listen. He ignored me completely, and this coldness continued for an entire month. The man I married had become a stranger, and I was at a loss. In my desperation, I sought advice from my old friend Claire. Claire, who works for a cosmetics company, is someone I've always turned to in times of trouble. She's successful, well-connected, and has always offered wise counsel, whether it's about studies, love, or personal struggles. After hearing my story, Claire nodded solemnly. "That's unusual. A couple in their third year of marriage, living under the same roof, and the husband ignores the wife. That's not normal. You haven't done anything wrong, have you, Jessica?" "No, I haven't," I replied, feeling utterly confused. That's why I don't understand why he's become so cold. Claire, sensing my distress, promised to help me get to the bottom of it, though I had no idea at the time. It seemed Claire had already picked up on something. If you've done nothing wrong, Jessica, then it's on him. He must be hiding something shady. Let's find out the truth, whether it's eavesdropping, surveillance, or tailing him. We'll use every means necessary. Is it okay to do something like that? I asked nervously. Absolutely, Claire replied firmly. It's worse to ignore your spouse and keep secrets when you're married. At Claire's suggestion, I secretly installed small eavesdropping devices and cameras throughout our home. Guilt gnawed at me, but my need to uncover John's secret was far stronger. As expected, John continued to ignore me, his silence cutting deeper every day. John, hey, are you listening? I would ask, hoping for any response, but he remained distant. A few days later, my phone rang. It was John. Hello? Where the hell are you? What are you trying to pull? Leaving the house for a week? His voice was full of anger. Why don't you ask yourself why I'm doing this? I shot back. What are you talking about? Speak clearly, I don't understand. Seriously? You haven't noticed? You don't know why I'm so angry? My frustration boiled over. How dare he demand clarity after ignoring me for so long? Prompted by Claire to investigate, I uncovered a shocking truth about John. The betrayal was so devastating that I couldn't stay in our home any longer. I took refuge at Claire's house, my heart heavy with anger and disbelief. It wasn't until the 7th day of my stay that John finally called. If you have something to say to me, then say it to my face, loud and clear, he suggested. Fine by me, as long as you promise not to ignore what I have to say, I retorted, the fury from my discovery still burning in my chest. The weight of his betrayal, trampling on my dedication, was too much to bear. John needed to face the consequences of his actions. I set a date and location, ending the call swiftly before he could respond. Later, we met at a local cafe. John had clearly slipped out during work, still dressed in his business suit. There was no need for any pleasantries. I got straight to the point. I laid out the evidence I had collected on the table, letting each damning photo speak for itself. What is this? Hey, stop it. Jessica, don't lay out these things, John protested, panic creeping into his voice. If you don't like it, why don't you pick them up yourself? I replied coolly, it doesn't matter, though I can print out as many as I want. His face paled as he stared at the incriminating photos, images of him with his mistress, walking arm in arm downtown, and even entering a hotel together. The woman in all the photos was the same person. Her name was Mary, as I had discovered during my investigation. I also have audio recordings. Would you like to listen to them right here? I asked, knowing I had him cornered. Audio? He echoed, clearly shocked. I tapped the screen on my smartphone, and immediately, a conversation between John and Mary began to play. Hey, John, when is our housemate planning on leaving? She'll be gone soon. She's losing her patience and will probably suggest a divorce. I wish she would just blow up at us, saying stop ignoring me. That would be the easiest for me. This is such a long-term scheme. Well, that's just like you, John, isn't it? When I cut off the audio, John looked frustrated, as if he was only now realizing he'd been caught. His expression was a mix of anger and desperation, as if he was on the verge of lashing out. John, I began, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. You needed someone to take care of your mother, didn't you? That's why you married me. But now that your mother has passed away, I guess I'm no longer needed. John's true intention had always been Mary, but Mary had no desire to take care of his mother. So he chose me, the one willing to shoulder that responsibility. To him, it didn't matter who took on the burdensome duty of caregiving, as long as someone did. After his mother passed away, the housemaid was no longer needed, and that's when his plan to make life unbearable and push me toward divorce began to unfold. What a petty, mean-spirited, and unreasonable way to behave, I thought. It was a blatant disrespect to the sanctity of marriage. The only silver lining in this mess was that we didn't have any children. Children, huh? I continued, my voice laced with bitterness. You knew all along, didn't you? You never planned on having kids because you knew we would eventually separate. If we had children, You'd be stuck paying child support after the divorce. John sighed heavily, his shoulders slumping. Most of what you're saying is true. I married you with the intention of leaving from the start. You're the worst. John, what do you think my life is? Just a convenience for you? My bad, he replied with a dismissive shrug. That said, it does save me a lot of trouble. Let's get divorced. Of course, I agreed, but not before I finish speaking with someone else. Someone else? You don't mean? Before he could finish, two women arrived, right on time. Sorry to keep you waiting, one of them said. John looked stunned. What is this? You can't mean. John, meet Mary, I said coldly. So, you're the housemaid now? I'm not a housemaid, I shot back. I'm still his wife, at least for now. Turning to Claire, I added, thank you. You're welcome, she replied, a slight smile on her lips. John's eyes darted between me, Claire, and Mary, trying to process what was happening. Claire, but I thought you were looking for new cosmetics to review. I'm sorry, that was a lie, Claire admitted, her tone unapologetic. What I was actually looking for was my best friend's husband's mistress. In other words, you. She then seated Mary next to John, sealing his fate with a cold finality. I laid out the same incriminating photos of the affair on the table in front of Mary. Her reaction was like that of a child caught in mischief, wide-eyed and startled, but without fully grasping the seriousness of the situation. It didn't matter what her attitude was. I knew exactly what I needed to do. I'm going to demand compensation from both of you, I stated firmly. What are you talking about? Mary stammered. Why should I have to pay compensation? I haven't done anything wrong. Have I troubled you in some way? Do you really believe that? I asked, incredulous. Mary, I've confirmed that you're married. How would you feel if your own husband was involved with another woman? Doesn't that trouble you? Mary, who came from a wealthy family, seemed completely detached from reality. She blinked at me in confusion, as if the concept of consequences was foreign to her. You knew John was married when you entered into a relationship with him, correct? I pressed. Well, yes, but that's already crossing the line into adultery. That's why you're being asked to pay compensation. Do you understand? Your relationship with John has caused me significant harm. I was there first. I was with John before you got married, Mary protested, her voice rising. That may be true, I acknowledged, but it doesn't matter who was first. The fact remains that you committed adultery. That's enough. Whether she genuinely didn't understand or simply didn't want to, convincing Mary was a tiresome task. Eventually, she slumped onto the table, tears streaming down her face, wailing that her father would definitely scold her. I couldn't help but wonder if she meant her husband. The thought crossed my mind to inform her that I'd be sending a certified letter soon, but I decided against it. I'd probably have to start by explaining what a certified letter even was. While I dealt with Mary, John sat in silence, a solemn expression on his face. He knew the gravity of the situation, even if Mary didn't. John, sign these two documents, I said, sliding the papers across the table. One is the divorce agreement, and the other is the divorce petition. He looked over the documents, his expression tightening when he reached the section on compensation. $30,000? Isn't that too much? Don't underestimate the extent of my mental distress, I replied sharply. My words shut him up for good. The only sound left in the restaurant was Mary's soft, sniffling sobs. Later, our divorce went through without any issues. I confirmed that the compensation and asset distribution were transferred into the specified bank account in one lump sum. With that money, I decided to move into a slightly more expensive apartment, a fresh start. At last, it was a luxury I afforded myself to lift my spirits and mark the beginning of a new chapter. As for John, he had to sell his childhood home to cover the compensation. It was a pitiful sight. After paying the necessary amount, his finances were nearly wiped out, and the $30,000 he paid me wasn't the only debt he had to settle. In the end, John ended up owing well over $100,000. It turned out that Mary was the wife of an executive at one of John's company's crucial clients. When the executive discovered the affair through the certified mail I sent, complete with damning photos as evidence, he was furious. Mary had not only cheated on him but also betrayed his company by leaking sensitive information to John. This caused a major rift between the two companies, and John was caught in the fallout. John lost everything: his job, his reputation, and any support he had from his superiors and colleagues. He was fired and hit with a huge amount in damages. One of his former colleagues even mentioned that John was being given the cold shoulder by everyone he knew. "Poor guy," the colleague said, though there was little sympathy in his voice. "But he brought it on himself. Do you think he'll be repaying this debt for the rest of his life?" "Honestly, I believe that's exactly what will happen," I replied. John's future looked bleak. The overwhelming cost of his affair left him scrambling to make ends meet. He struggled to find another full-time job and eventually gave up, resorting to odd jobs to get by. The life he had so carefully constructed crumbled to dust, leaving him with nothing but regret. There are also rumors that the managing director was secretly working to stop John from finding a new job, but no one knows if that's true, and it's unlikely anyone would benefit from finding out. After his divorce, John reconnected with Mary, who had also gone through a divorce, and they started living together. However, things aren't going well for them. Mary spends money like water, and John's struggling to keep up. He works hard at jobs like warehouse cleaning, moving, and checking car parts, but the money he earns disappears quickly on Mary's shopping, cosmetics, makeup, bags, clothes, you name it. They constantly argue about money, and even though they're not cheating on each other anymore, their relationship is strained. John even called me once to ask for financial help because they were struggling. "What did you do?" you might ask. Of course, I refused. I have no obligation to help them. Why would I? After all, they used to call me a maid behind my back. It doesn't matter to me what happens to them now. After the divorce, I went back to my job in medical administration, and I'm happily working at a new place. I'm so busy that I barely have time to think, and that's just how I like it. When I do have free time, unpleasant memories creep back, and I start feeling down. The other day, I ran into the person who embodies all those bad memories, John. It was on my way home from work, on a lonely road at twilight. He called out to me, and when I turned around, I was shocked. John had completely changed. His hair and beard were long and unkempt, his skin was tanned, and his cheeks were thin and sunken. His clothes were dirty and ragged. I was surprised and appalled at how different he looked. "Hey, long time no see," he said. "Is that you, John?" I asked, taken aback. "Are you okay? Are you managing to eat every day?" I couldn't help but ask, even though I was supposed to despise him. Despite everything, his pitiful state tugged at my heartstrings. "I'm getting by, but it's not 3 meals a day." "What about work?" "Not much these days. I collect empty cans and old magazines during the day. If I take them to a dealer, they pay me by the pound." After we talked for a while, John hesitantly brought up the real reason he had approached me. "Listen, do you think we could try again?" "What about Mary? I thought you two were living together." "I broke up with her. She dumped me. She's probably gone back to her parents' home by now. I bet they'll arrange a marriage for her with someone suitable." As he talked about Mary, his face twisted with pain. It must have been a difficult breakup, even hard for him to talk about with me. But despite his current pitiful state, I couldn't offer him any help. The memory of the abuse I suffered is still fresh and infuriating. When I said this, John lowered his head in agreement. "I truly apologize for what I did back then. I'm not going to say it's okay, but let's both move on. Just don't approach me again. If you stalk me, I'll call the police." "I won't stalk you. I'm sorry for bothering you. So, see you then." John slowly walked away down the dimly lit street, his figure fading into the distance. He looked so pitiful, so frustratingly pathetic. After that, I saw John a few times in line at a soup kitchen run by a non-profit organization. He had become so thin, and when he noticed me looking, he awkwardly turned his face away. Every time I see him, I think to myself that I never want to end up like that. He serves as a negative example, a reminder of what I want to avoid. This is how my first marriage ended disastrously, but I haven't given up on building a happy family with someone. There's still a long road ahead, and I believe I can still find happiness. With that in mind, I've decided to start participating in local social events with my friend Claire. Being divorced doesn't mean I should feel intimidated. The world is vast, and somewhere out there must be a man who will embrace me gently.